What up, y'all? I am back for another video. Today, I am reviewing Godzilla Minus One, and man, this is, when I first heard this movie was coming out, I was so hyped, and man, this is one of those movies where the hype actually delivers. This is my favorite film of the year now. John Wick 4 was, but this is overtaken, and honestly, this might be my new favorite Godzilla movie, just in general. The way it's such a callback to the original. It's very more in the tone. So it's in its own timeline. Basically, it's set right after World War II. It starts in 45, goes to 46 and 47. So those are the timeline. And man, when they mean post-war trauma, that's what this movie is. Like, Godzilla is like a reaction to what happened, but this very much it was right after the war. So it's like right after, obviously the atomic bomb. So Japan is in a bad state, and the movie shows you that. They really show. I mean, even that fucking opening scene when we first see Godzilla, kind of like, it's not like Shin Godzilla, but it starts with Godzilla's not fully evolved yet. It's not until like later in the movie, because it's set a couple of years, because when Godzilla reappears, it's like years after. So, not years, but a couple of years after. So when you initially see him, he's a bit smaller, he's not as evolved. But even then, this movie makes Godzilla scary. I think that's like one of my biggest things. This is the scariest Godzilla, I think, in film. Like, Godzilla was he's a force of nature in this movie. He is straight up a bad guy. That opening sequence, he's not eating people, but you see him like bite people and throw them and shit. He's smashing them with their tail when he attacks Odo Island. Because the movie's about a kamikaze pilot named Koichi. I'm just gonna say Koichi Shiskima, I think is his last name. Who he feigns engine problems because he runs away from his duty. Because he's supposed to be a kamikaze pilot, but he decides to live. So he lands in Odo Island with a bunch of mechanics. They're trying to fix his plane. Then that's when Godzilla appears. And he's supposed to get in the gunner and shoot, and he freezes. And unfortunately leading to a bunch of the men getting killed. And this sequence, like, Godzilla is frightening. And he's not even, like, evolved yet. Like, he's not the Godzilla we know. He doesn't do his heat ray. He's not as big either at this point. And he's still fucking a monster. That whole scene, dude, when he's just fucking them up, it was crazy. So, the next morning, Tachibana is the only other one that's left. And he pretty much blames Koichi for it. So Koichi goes back home, and he's kind of seen as a pariah for a little bit, because he is a kamikaze pilot. If you remember what kamikaze pilots did. And yeah, he's seen as like a massive dishonor. So he's almost like, this is where he meets Noriko, who's her baby Akiko. It's not her baby, but her family was killed in the raids. This movie, like, it's very much post World War II. Like, it's right after. And man, you feel like it's a somber movie. It's, it's definitely not like just a happy note movie. Like, you're dealing with the fallout of World War II. And the other thing I really like what they do with this movie is the way Godzilla is there. Fish start, like, dying, and their bodies start popping up in the surface. And they do that because Godzilla's radiation. I really love that detail they touch on. This movie feels like a very realistic take on Godzilla. It still has those monster movie elements, but it does have a realistic take. Like, yeah, it makes sense. Godzilla is radiation. So, of course, she would be emitting radiation. And yeah, him swimming in the water, of course, the fish in there are going to probably fucking die because of the radiation. So I love that little touch. Like this is very much a if Godzilla was real, I'd almost look at it like that. And yeah, you get a lot of Godzilla, but you don't get a lot of good because there's a big portion of the movie sometimes you don't see him. And the human, the humans. This is one of the few Godzilla movies, probably the only Godzilla movie. Where the human stuff is so good. Like it is engaging. Like you really care for Koichi and Noriko, who's this woman he takes, and obviously begrudgingly and eventually, yeah, he basically becomes her father. They become pseudo married almost, and he gets a job basically picking up mines, in the sea because somebody has to do it. This is post World War II, so it makes sense. And yeah, they really deal with PTSD well, especially Koichi's. He has nightmares about what happened, and obviously he has survivor's guilt. All his men died, and it's in a way, yeah, he blames himself. It's like if I didn't just fucking freeze up. And to be fair, you understood why he froze up. What you're just a soldier in this time, and up until this point, you don't think monsters and shit like that are real. And then you see something like that come out of the water. I can understand freezing up. So it's such an understandable, but you feel for the character and what he's going through. And there's a scene specifically where he's talking with Noriko about like what actually happened and why he, feels dishonor about himself. And Noriko's trying to comfort him. He's having like a breakdown almost. Such a fucking phenomenal scene. Like the acting is incredible. I mean, even though, yeah, it's subtitled, so it's not in English, but you feel for these fucking characters. So yeah, I fucking love this movie. This, as a Godzilla fan, and there's a moment where Godzilla arrives in Ginza, and that music kicks in, that classic do 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 do, that song kicks in. Yeah, I was like, holy shit! I'm like, we're in for a fucking treat. Like I said, Godzilla in this is a force of nature. And I will tell you right now, no, like Shin Godzilla, no monster fights. He's not fighting like another monster. To be fair, I wasn't expecting this film to be that, baby. and there's very much you could tell the homage to Jaws because if you saw the trailer where he's chasing the boat and you see his head poking out of the water. One of my favorite fucking shots ever. The cinematography and the fact that it's kind of the numbers mixed. Some are saying 15 million, but I'm also hearing 35 million. However it costs, it looks incredible. It looks better than basically almost every superhero movie in the last few years. Godzilla looks real, and they did a good job of making it look like, even though it's not a guy in the suit, like they CGI'd it, making it like it's an homage to like it feels like it's a guy in a suit, like that kind of style Godzilla movie. When he attacks Ginza, man, I'm not gonna lie, I felt like a little fucking kid again in the theater. I was just I was fucking marking out. Like, obviously, in the theater, I can't just be screaming, but in my head, I was eternal. I was like, yes. When that music kicks in, I was like, bro, I wasn't expecting. They didn't play it in any of the trailers. So when that song kicks in, the dude, like when that do 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 comes in, I was, oh man, dude. Like I am. This is Ollie. I was saying this earlier. This is probably the only genuine, like, my only 10 out of 10 movie this year. This is a 10. Like, I don't, obviously, it could be a little bit of the hype. I'm definitely watching this again, but it is a 10 out of 10 movie. The dialogue, the story, the sound design, the score is beautiful because it's a nice version of Godzilla's theme. Obviously, it's a little modernized a little bit, but man, and then the final sequence where Koji, the plan is they're gonna try to sink Godzilla, and like the way they do the science is they explain it perfectly that they're gonna try to send him down below and then send him back up. because of the decompression, that should kill him. Like the ways they would try to come up with killing Godzilla, and also yeah, it's very anti-government because the government doesn't want to get involved. They in the way they add real world kind of conflict too, because they mention America's not going to get involved, so they don't start tensions with Russia because this is obviously about pre kind of Cold War, right? Like a little bit after the Cold War started, so they didn't want any tensions with Russia, so America decided to not get involved. And then the Japanese government didn't get involved, so the private citizens had to come up with a way to fight. Like, I really love that. Like, that real life. Like, this is, like I said, it's a sad movie, but it's not, like, sad to the point where it's not fun. Like, no. Like, if you're into Godzilla shit, if you just want to see a monster movie, even if you don't want to just say, I don't necessarily need a great plot, just want a monster movie, this movie is still for you. And I'm going to say it, this is, if you want to find a movie to show a normie, get normies to get into Godzilla, this is the one. You don't have to necessarily know the lore to understand this movie, because there's not a lot of other monsters. It's a very straightforward monster movie. And that scene when Godzilla does the atomic breath for the first time is one of the most beautiful sequences. And I love how he does it. Like, his spikes, like, rise up when each of them go up when they turn blue. It looks so good. And then, yeah, the connection between Noriko and Koichi is so well done. And, there's a scene where she seemingly dies. I thought she died. Like, when Godzilla did the atomic breath, she, like, pushes him into, like, safety, but she gets blown away. And you think she died. I thought she died. I was like, wow. They actually, and then, you find out later she survived. But, yeah, man. And Koichi's like, okay, no, I gotta kill this thing. I gotta prove my honor. It is such a well-made movie, man. Y'all will love it. Go see it. I want this movie to do so well. I want this to be the biggest hit of December in terms of film. It deserves it. It's so well done. It's not overly long, so like this 2 hours and 5 minutes. But it feels like a lot has happened in those 2 hours and 5 minutes, and that's why it's so well made. Good characters. This is easily the best Godzilla movie for me. Best modern Godzilla for sure. And I love King of the Monsters, but this definitely has eclipsed that as my favorite modern Godzilla movie. I'd say, like I said, this is the one, if you want to show normies, like, obviously besides the original, this might be the one you show. You don't need to know the lore to understand this movie. The characters are great. The cinematography is beautiful, man. It is a beautiful movie, and that's why I'm giving it a 10 out of everything that makes a great film. And when people say throw around the word cinema, this is cinema. This is what fucking cinema should be. This is easily my favorite theater experience too in a movie this year. Like, it was an event. Like, there's a scene where Godzilla attacks Skins and Noriko's on a train, and Godzilla attacks the train. He bites the train, he lifts it, and she's in it, and you see her like slide through, and she's like dangling, and the cinema, like, that's what I mean by cinema. Like, just some of those shots, man. This is what, like, going to the theater in a theater experience should be, and it's a movie like this. So yeah, this definitely, yeah, I love this movie, guys. So yeah, I'm happy to finally talk about it. I was so hyping it up, and the fact that it's one of those things I hyped up and it delivered, and I don't even almost argue, over delivered. Yeah. You're a Godzilla fan, you're gonna love this movie. And yeah, in the end, they end up, because they rig a plane for Koichi to fly. And he seemingly, does kamikaze into Godzilla's mouth, and it blows up and seemingly kills Godzilla. But we see that in the end, he's regenerating. So obviously, they're gonna do another one. And honestly, I kind of almost wanted them to keep it in the tone of this. I want more of this. Would it be cool to see him eventually fight like other monsters? Yeah, but I want maybe 2 or 3 movies of him just being a force of nature, and then maybe down the line he starts fighting other monsters. But kind of right now, I'm loving the direction of this. Maybe you do a movie like this for every decade. Have the next one be in the 50s, and then the third one could be in the 60s, and maybe the last one is where, if you want to, because I think you could do a couple of these, but in different decades. But in this tone, that's why I kind of rather be this, because I love Force of Nature Godzilla, because this is, to me, of the films, this Godzilla is legit the scariest one. Because there's just scenes, man. Oh, there's a sequence where the reporter is like reporting on top of a building and Godzilla's like right over. He's like reporting what Godzilla's doing. That whole Ginza sequence was just beautiful, beautifully done. So yeah. Later, well, tomorrow I'm seeing Silent Night. I'm debating whether I'm gonna review it tomorrow or save the review for Sunday and then just tomorrow do the Prowler by itself. We'll see. I'll see how I'm feeling, because I might end up, if Silent Night's really good, then I'm gonna probably just review it tomorrow, and then just Sunday we just do the Screen Rant article. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. But yeah, Godzilla minus one, 10 out of 10. Film of the year. I'm definitely seeing it again. Uh, yeah, man. This is what film should fucking be. This film puts so many bad movies, like, why the fuck are you doing these movies for $200 million when 15 million, 35 million, either or? How the fuck can they do that with that kind of money and you bring out something this incredible? But Marvel or Disney or whatever, not even just Disney, but these movies, we gotta put $300 million in. Like, why? Why do you need that giant of a fucking budget when a movie like this looks this fucking good? And several years later, like, let's say like 2020's, like 2029, 2030, this movie is still gonna look incredible. Versus like some shitty Disney movie that with the $200 million budget is gonna look awful even just within like 2 years. It's insane to me. This is what filmmaking should be. And honestly, it's crazy that it's really the last IP that, in terms of, that hasn't been ruined, left. It really is. And that's because Toho clearly, like, Godzilla is an icon to them. He's almost a national treasure at this point in Japan. And I think that's why whatever Japanese director, whoever makes these movies, you know, they clearly have an appreciation for Godzilla, because that's their lore. And I think that's why it has been good for this long. Doesn't matter the version. Yeah, not every Godzilla thing's good, but largely it hasn't been ruined, It hasn't been like drove to the ground. So that's why in 2023, 36 fucking movies, 70 years, this franchise, whole 70 something years, this franchise is 70 years old. And you're telling me they can't, it has been consistent. That's why I'm a fan still. And this was just, like I said, I felt like a little kid again watching this movie. So, anyway, let's get into the review. So the movie starts, and this is where we see Koichi, who's a kamikaze pilot, fake having technical issues with his plane because he decides he wants to live instead of doing a kamikaze mission. Lands in Odo Island, and he's talking with the workers there, or mechanics. And then this is where Godzilla appears out of the water, and this is not a fully final form Godzilla yet. This is like still in his like early years. This is like right after the war, 1945. And man, that opening sequence, I wasn't ready. I didn't think they were gonna open it like this. Godzilla, just from the start, is scary. And I love how they did his roar in this, And it almost like you felt like when he roared, there was like a sense of like, in a good Godzilla movie, I want to feel like I could hear his roar, like, I mean, in real life, and they did a good job with this. Granted, I watched it in the theater, but still, you're gonna have that surround sound, but it was just something. It was an experience This like I don't get me wrong, love Godzilla later in the movie, but this is probably in terms of like fear and scare. This was Godzilla at his scariest. Just him walking, and so they tell Koichi to get into the gunner, to use the gun on the jet, on the plane to kill Godzilla, and Godzilla walks over, and Koichi, you know, freezes. And it's understandable why he freezes. This is, you've never dealt with this, you know? And you also got to take into account, he was really close. Like how close that plane was to Godzilla, I can understand. And then when Godzilla gets closer, the soldiers start shooting, but unfortunately, Godzilla, all it does is just piss him off, and he just starts fucking destroying them, killing them all. It was sad to watch. That's the other thing. Like the characters, they don't hold back on Godzilla killing people, because in a lot of the other movies, when even like when he's a good guy, when he's kind of walking through a building, they don't almost like, you don't think about like, oh, there are people in that building. Like this movie shows you Godzilla just. There's moments in this movie where you straight up, even like later on, you straight up just see him step on people. In this sequence, he's like kills them with their tail. It was just crazy to watch. Like you don't, because you don't outright for the most part see Godzilla kill people. People die because of the destruction, but they don't usually show it like that. They showed it in this movie. He's like grabbing people and then throwing them. It was a crazy sequence, and Koichi ends up getting knocked, jumps out of the plane when Godzilla bites it, and he ends up getting knocked down. And then when he wakes up, he sees Tachibana kind of, grab all the bodies, and Tachibana blames Koichi for the deaths. So we see then Koichi head back home, and when he heads back home, he finds out his parents are dead. They died in the raids, and his neighbor shames him, because she mentions that her sons died, and that because she remembers that he was a kamikaze pilot, and that seeing that he's alive, and man, like I said, you feel that post-war, feel in Japan. Like they really let you feel it, and man, it is hard to watch a little bit, especially that opening scene, like all the destroyed buildings and all that, and and all that. So it's really they really like, it's not just like your normal Godzilla movie, like, where it's just monster, like little simple monster movie. Like no, like they told a story here. And yeah, there is a hero's journey with Koichi. He has survivor's guilt. And that's when he takes, and this is when he meets Noriko and her baby. And Noriko, initially, how she's introduced is she's getting chased. She gives him the baby while she's being chased, and then they meet again. Initially, Koichi tries to tell her to go away, and then he lets her save food, but then she passes out, and basically he just starts letting her stay. And the neighbor starts helping out too, and essentially they don't outright say it, but it's pretty much, yeah, they become a couple and take care of Akiko. So, and yeah, throughout the film, Koichi has nightmares about what happened in Odo Island. And I love that whole sequence when he walks out and he's just seeing what happened again, and you believe and you feel bad for the character. There's even moments where he thinks he's dead. He thinks, oh, this is just, I'm dead. I'm still actually just dead on the island. Like when he breaks down, it is hard to watch. You feel bad for what he's going through. And you gotta go through, it's one of probably, in terms of character arc in film or just anything this year, this is probably my favorite in terms of character arc in any movie. He was so good. You are right there with him and what he goes through, and that is good storytelling. So he then gets a job, picking up mines along with Dr. Noda, Captain Yoji, who's like the main captain, and they're a good little group of characters too. And one day while they're out there, while this happens, we jump ahead to 1946, and this is where Godzilla appears, again, reappears, but now obviously he's fully almost evolved now. And they just show that he attacked a ship, and then when the team arrives at the ship, I love that shot of the ship too. It's just like sunken into the water. And yeah, this is where you get a lot of the Jaws inspiration, and where you get, in my opinion, one of the coolest shots where Godzilla appears in the water and chases the ship. I love that whole sequence. And like that moment when Koichi sees Godzilla again, he has that like PTSD kicks in. They really handled his specific PTSD. I think in general PTSD, because to be honest, Japan in general has PTSD. They're already starting to rebuild, right? Like the whole movie, they're already rebuilding from what happened in World War II, and what happened with that. Now they got to rebuild again later on when Godzilla arrives. It is, yeah, man. Japan goes through it in this movie. So, they try using mines on Godzilla, and mines just aren't working. They try shooting one in his mouth, and it seemingly hurts him, but then he just regenerates. And the Takao, which is like this big Japanese battleship, attacks Godzilla, and Godzilla just destroys it with ease, with the atomic breath. And this is where you first see it. You don't actually see him like come out of his mouth. You just see a beam shoot out of the water. It is such an awesome sequence. And then Godzilla goes away again. And then this is where we have that breakdown scene. Oh my god, that is the acting, because Noriko could tell something's up with Noichi, and he's like trying to keep it within, and he finally tells her, and he breaks down, how much he basically feels like a failure. And that he thinks he's still dead, and yeah, like they really goes into his survivor's guilt, and they really handled that scene. That actor did such a good job. Like, man, he made you feel it. So then they go out. Then this is where they go into Godzilla's gonna show up again in Japan. And they try to some of the ships try to hold him back, but it doesn't work. Destroys him. There's just scenes too where Godzilla's just throwing shit. Like there's a scene where a train will just get thrown into frame. It is one of my favorite things in this entire movie. They do it a couple of times where just something just gets, you just see something fleeing into the fucking air. It is awesome. And it was where Godzilla arrives in Tokyo. Noriko's out on the train, like for a normal day in Ginza, and Godzilla appears, man. When he first appears, it is like, it plays like an old Godzilla movie, and that's what this is too. Like they have that like emotional connection, like, which is usually not in a Godzilla, but it also plays like a classic Godzilla, especially this moment. That music kicks in, and it's like, oh my god, it's on. And yeah, man, they don't hold back. Like I said, you see Godzilla stomp on people, just destroying buildings, and you feel the tragedy of it. Like, it's usually you're like, oh, Godzilla's fucking shit up, and people most of the time we're with it. But it is kind of sad to watch. They make it a tragedy in this movie. They really do a good job with that. Like you see, it's like, they just rebuilt this city, obviously in Japan, they even mention it in the movie. That's like, there's a scene where Noriko gets a job, and she says, oh, Ginza's being rebuilt, and, everything's going, and then just to see this happen again, and it's not even like that long. because I think it's still 46. So this would have been like a year after the war ended, when the bomb happened. And that's what makes this film, or a couple years after the bomb happened. And such an iconic film, man. And when Godzilla attacks a train and you see Noriko hanging on and, her having to. I love that whole sequence. They do a good job of going back and forth where, you're in Godzilla's view and then her view. And yeah, it's the tragedy of him just destroying the city. But this is where we get that scene of the reporter reporting on God. I actually really love that scene too. Like, I love that scene because it's like, because you feel bad for him because there's a scene where Godzilla then, topples that building and they're on it. Like I said, this film really doesn't hold back on showing Godzilla kill people because you don't outright see him kill people in a lot of the movies. Obviously you figure people are gonna die because he's walking through buildings, so yeah, okay, there are people in there, but you're not usually seeing it, and you don't outright just see him step on people like that. And this one he does. And then we see Godzilla do the atomic. So Noriko and Koichi get reunited, and she pushes Koichi into like an little alleyway into safety when Godzilla's about to do the atomic breath. And I love how the atomic breath is it's like a mini nuke. They treat it as like almost like a little nuke because that's kind of what it is. So it makes sense like that would happen. Like Godzilla leaving radiate. I love that's why I was saying it has a little bit of what if God, it has like a realistic take on Godzilla, because yeah, Godzilla would probably leave radiation, and it makes sense when you would shoot an atomic breath, that basically is like a nuke. So, and they treat it like that, and it has this blast. It leaves this force too, and man, when you see him do it, and Noriko pushes him, and I'll admit, I thought at this point she fucking died. Hold on, let me see. Stop filming. Yeah, I thought she died at this point, and no, she's still alive, and you feel for Noriko. He lets out this kind of scream, because yeah, you just saw the love of his life, because he was basically saying, I just want to live. Can I live? And then he even goes back after Noriko, seemingly because he thought she was dead, and it's I just can't have it. It's he has this moment of reality. I can't be happy. I just can never be happy. So man, he is such a good character. He borderline might be my favorite character in the project this year. If it wasn't for John Wick, because I still love him, but more as a character. But I don't know, man. This character's arc in this movie is just Koichi's arc is so beautiful, man. You feel bad for him, because it's that moment. So I can't just be I think he was about to, because he was slowly, because he didn't initially obviously want to acknowledge that because he was even initially saying to Kiko, I'm not your father, and all that, but then it's he was going to eventually want to propose, and yeah, man, it's such a good fucking film. And so after this, the government basically decides they're not going to do anything about Godzilla, so the town has to come together, private citizens, and figure out a way to kill Godzilla. And so Noda asks Koichi to help him join this group, and they all come up with a plan to kill Godzilla. That they're gonna send him deep underwater with these this gas, basically that would send him down to the water, and if that doesn't work, they're gonna bring him way back up to where his body would decompress in theory, and that would kill him. And I love also the realization. There's a scene where one of the captains says, "Oh, we're asking you to join the war again. and then some of the men leave because they're like, I can't sacrifice for my fight and die for my country again and die again. I just want to be with my family. They acknowledge that reality, but I think the ones that say it also realized this is for our future. We could just walk away, and then Godzilla's just still gonna come back because you know um, Noda explains like he considers Tokyo's basically saying Tokyo's Godzilla's territory now. So this is his stomping ground. So he owns it. So he's gonna be around forever. So it's like if we don't get rid of it or try to do something about it, our future's done. And I really love that this movie acknowledges that. So and then I love the scene with that scene where Yoji freaks out on Koichi, because he was like pushing for him to basically try to marry Noriko. So I love like that, like obviously what's happening with Godzilla is kind of making everyone not necessarily stir crazy, but yeah, like everybody's on edge, and it makes sense why sometimes they might. So Koichi asks Noda if he can get him a plane. So the plan is so he can use the plane to lure Godzilla into the trap. And he tries to get Tachibana, who was the mechanic earlier back at Odo Island. And he makes letters basically talking, not necessarily talking shit, but basically trying to make it seem like it was Tachibana's fault at what happened. So basically it's to draw out Tachibana. And Tachibana initially reluctant to agree to help him. And then Koichi manages to convince him. So they put the plane back together and come up with a plan to kill Godzilla. And I love the moment between Akiko and it's like almost like a final moment because they make it seem like obviously Koichi's gonna die, right? Because he's gonna finally get in his destiny. I'm gonna sacrifice myself to kill this thing. So, and it's almost like a final moment with him and his daughter, and it's so well done. Like this is one of the few movies that actually has a really a good father figure. Even though he's not like by blood Akiko's father, he's doing this all for his family. And it's just nice to see that in the movie. So he leaves the next night. They get ready to do the plan. Initially, the plan doesn't really work out. Godzilla arrives. And the initial decompression plan seemingly works, but then he comes right back up. And he's too heavy and all that. So that's when a bunch of other boats show up. So basically, the cavalry kind of show up. They help pull Godzilla up, but Godzilla's getting ready to do his. I should have skipped. Yeah, I skipped over. Koichi, luring Godzilla to the trap, and he's just kind of flying around, pissing Godzilla off. Godzilla's about to do his atomic breath when Koichi flies the plane into his mouth, Godzilla's mouth, and it explodes. But we get the reveal that Tachibana put an escape, basically an ejector seat into the plane. So he explains that, and this is where he tells Koichi, live. So basically, in a sense, it's almost him like forgiving Koichi for what happened back at Odo Island. So Koichi's still alive, and then we also find out, because there was a scene where a telegram shows up, and we find out that Noriko is still alive. So he visits her in the hospital. and it's such a nice read. You feel bad, like that character's arc, and I think I'm actually happy they didn't kill him because it would have been kind of predictable. Granted, it still would have worked because that would have been it. He completed the mission, but I am actually happy how they did it. Think he was a good character, so you didn't necessarily need to kill him off, and everything is seemingly fine. But we see Godzilla regenerating, so they're probably gonna do another movie, and I'm open to it. But I'm hoping it's in the same tone as this. I personally want it to be like in the decades, like do the next one in the 50s, like have it be like maybe 1954. Have it be a bit after this movie, and you could do the same character you do a different character to follow. But I wouldn't mind a sequel being like that. But yeah, I'm open to one because this movie was awesome. This is how you do a Godzilla film. And honestly, it's just a good, if you want to just look into like trauma, this movie hits in that sense, man. There's a lot of shit. Sorry about that. What Koichi goes through when you feel bad. So, my dog's barking. Sorry, guys. Anyway. So, yeah, Koichi, his little arc, is just sorry guys, holy shit. So I'm just gonna power through. Yeah, and I really just the tone of this movie is perfect, and the way it isn't just a monster movie. It's they really you have the post trauma. They really deal with the trauma well of just the country of Japan at that time, because it's like smack dap right after the war ended, and it go right into it. So yeah, man, and Koichi's himself, man, like you feel for what he goes, and you understood why he froze up too. It's not like, oh, he froze up, he's an asshole. Like, no, you understand why he froze up, how close he was to Godzilla. It's one of those movies too where you feel like you are with the action. It's not just like an action movie or a monster movie where you're just watching a movie. Like you feel like you're actually there, and that's why. And I also love the whole. It feels like a real Godzilla movie. Sorry about the dog. Sorry, he was freaking out. But yeah, like you feel it is the most realistic Godzilla movie. Like to me, it feels like if Godzilla was real, the way even just the little touch of like the radiation stuff, they like that little deep. They put work into it, and I love that. Like when they put thought into shit like that. So I definitely recommend this movie. If you're a Godzilla fan, you're gonna love it. It has everything, and yeah, man, this might be the best Godzilla movie. I just think it is. Godzilla is legit scary in this film. He's not just Godzilla like we love him. He is a legit. You legit fear him in this movie. Like you fear him in this. He is a legit force of nature, and yeah, that's all I can say about that. So I'll definitely review some more Godzilla movies eventually, but I had to review this one. I mean, the hype was real for it, and it delivered. I think it over delivered, to be honest. Like everything was perfect. Sound design, the soundtrack, atmosphere, acting, just everybody delivered, and everything delivered about this movie. And like I said, if you're a normie who's never watched the Godzilla movies, this would be a one you could watch and you get into it. You don't need to know the lore to like watch this movie. But yeah, man, 10 out of 10 movie, favorite film this year. I'm definitely gonna watch it again. I hope this one does well because it deserves it. This is what a cinematic experience should be. So, yeah, man. Tomorrow I will be reviewing The Prowler, and then Depending on how I feel and also what time I see the movie, I'm gonna be if I see Silent Night early enough, and if I'm in the mood, I'll review it also tomorrow. I'm hearing a lot of good things about it. I'm hearing it's not like a traditional action movie, but it's really good, and that there's not a lot of dialogue apparently, and I'm fine with that. I loved Sisu, so I'm okay with that. So interested to see where this one goes. I love Joel Kinnaman, so should be great. So, but other than that, guys, 10 out of 10 movie. Go see Godzilla -1. This is one you should see in a theater. This is a cinematic experience type of movie, and it sucks. It's not. I do hate that it's limited. It should just been released everywhere. So I do think that might hinder it a bit from making a lot of money, but I hope it does at least decently. So, but other than that, guys, I'm gonna take one hit. Talk to y'all later. All right, y'all. Talk to y'all later. Peace.